Welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. On this episode, we are talking with our very own Kyle Boland about functional medicine. Has gone through a training that lasted about a year and so around everything functional medicine. And so here we just talk about what functional medicine is, how he is applying it to his practice, and what are some of the benefits of it. Very interesting episode, something to consider down the line in complements to your regular doctor visits. Enjoy. Well, welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are finding more and more time to get these episodes in, so we figure we make good use of it. We have not done a follow-up with Dr. Kyle for quite some time, especially as he's gone through a year-long, I believe, give or take, training around functional medicine. And so that is now something that he is offering through his clinic. It's always been kind of a fascination of his, I know, and it's always been interesting. On my end, I still remember reading Ultra Metabolism, I believe, by Dr. Mark Hyman out of the Cleveland Clinic. Ultra Prevention was the one. He has an Ultra Metabolism too, I think. But anywho, it's always been interesting looking at those different things and being able to use non-prescription things to help rectify some stuff. So with that, we'll just jump right in and kind of get talking about it and how it can apply and where it kind of fits currently and where Kyle sees it going in the future.
Yeah.
So really the first question is, if you want to give, I guess, a little bit more background on the program you went through and what that all entailed, but ultimately kind of answering the question of like, what is functional medicine?
Sure. So I guess backing up to the program, I was seeing a lot of patients in the office that were suffering with X, Y, or Z, chronic medical, I guess you would say, conditions or chronic health issues that just weren't having a good quality of life, and they weren't getting the answers that they wanted or just kind of the care. They were just dissatisfied with it. I had done some reading as well, the Ultra Prevention book, a few other books that it kind of turned me onto the, the functional medicine approach. And so I wanted to be able to help them out in more than just, musculoskeletal wise or, the skills that I had to be able to help them out. I think I could, provide a valuable service in that regard, but there was still something missing that I couldn't help them with. I just kind of searched and didn't really know who to be able to send them to in the area. I tried reaching out to a few providers that they would have to travel a little bit for, but didn't ever really hear much back from them. Finally, it was just like, okay, well, it's super interesting to me. I think it'd be really cool to be able to offer to people, so I might as well just kind of dive in and learn more about it myself. So started looking into different programs, ultimately went with the Kresser Institute, and it's kind of Chris Kresser, not sure if you're familiar with him, but he provides this training, and I really like his teaching format. He's got a ton of articles, a lot of blogs. He's got books out there, but basically I really like that he explains things a way that's pretty easy to understand for the reader. It's not like super techy, but it's still science-based, and he still will reference, like the science or the literature, like why this is it. And then at the end of it, he has all of the articles kind of listed. So I liked that a lot. This program also offered like more practical ways to kind of like implement it in practice, in that, you know, it's not just like, okay, here's all this information and then you have to figure out what to do with it or how to like try to, you know, fit that into your practice and that type of thing. So obviously when implementing that, that was handy. And then also I like the aspect that it was online and it was over the course of a year instead of, you know, like some of the other ones you'd have to travel, you know, to whatever city in the U.S. And it's like a 3 to 5 day course, and it's just like intensive. Here's all that information, and then you just take it back, and then have to kind of like digest that and implement it, as opposed to like kind of bite-sized chunks that you can kind of work through, you know, while working at the same time, you know. So I just kind of like devoted some time each week just to kind of work through that. What it is really, functional medicine is basically an approach to care that just looks at the whole person rather than just kind of like breaking it down into, okay, you know, like just looking at it by system or by organ. It's just like, okay, looking at the whole person, how does that relate? You know, because a lot of times, you know, things are obviously interrelated. You impact one thing and that may have effect on other areas. Even addressing the person in that, okay, so maybe person A dealing with irritable bowel syndrome may not get the same types of recommendations or treatment as person B with the same, you know, diagnosis or same type of symptoms, because it, you know, may not fit them the same way in terms of their lifestyle or, you know, kind of the other things that they've got going on. So it's not just like a cookie cutter approach. I like how it can be kind of customized and tailored for that person. And I also try to view it as more of, not only with functional medicine, but chiropractic, of just like, okay, I'm not here telling you what to do. Like, I'm not just like, okay, this is what you need to do, lecturing, okay, this is what you have to do. I try to just like, okay, I'm on your side. Okay, I'm trying to help you. Let's discuss this together. What are your goals? How can I help you meet those goals? And then try to explain that, help the patient understand what's going on and how it may impact them, and like help educate them and make a decision moving forward, and just kind of lay out, okay, this is the options. Maybe these are the treatments. What sounds the best to you, or what kind of would fit into your lifestyle? Just trying to help them in that regard. So it really recognizes, so the term called an exposome, I wasn't familiar with that at all, but basically it's like the genome, so like your genetics, and then also like the exposome is like all the things outside of your genes that you're exposed to. So basically it starts with conception, right? Like, you know, that all the stuff that your mother takes in, you know, during pregnancy and is exposed to, like obviously there's things that can cross the placenta. So it starts from there, and then throughout birth, you know, it can be external stuff like the environment, you know, pollution or air quality, that type of stuff, or different chemicals that the person's exposed to. It can be internal stuff like, you know, hormones, metabolism, just different exposures there. And then obviously like food that people eat, you know, dietary stuff, you know, whether they're taking supplements or medications, that type of stuff. And then their physical activity. So like all these different things that can impact a person's life. And then how does that play a role with the genetics? And then how do you kind of like fit that into their lifestyle, I guess? Because a lot of genetics can not like they can be changed, but like with epigenetics, I think there's a lot more information out there right now with that, which is basically, okay, you have your genes, but then you can actually turn your genes up or down based on those environmental factors, you know, so like you can, Ben Lynch has a book called Dirty Genes, and he calls it, you know, like you can have a dirty gene and it can, you know, maybe act unfavorably, or you can do things to clean that up and it can act more favorably, so it can maybe not show up as much. An example would be schizophrenia. So, for example, you have identical twins, you would think that, you know, they have the exact same genetics, and, you know, they've got pretty much, for the most part, typically like the same, you know, upbringing, the same parents and environment and all that stuff. And most times people think, okay, like schizophrenia, that's a genetic disease that people suffer from, and it's only about 50% the rate of which, if one identical twin suffers from schizophrenia, that the other one will suffer from that. So obviously, like, there's more to that than just genetics. So I think looking at it from that perspective, all the different environmental factors, and maybe, you know, one thing doesn't do it, one doesn't impact it, but maybe the combination of all these different things, you know, are going to contribute to a person's disease or state of health, I guess I would say, more so.
I think that was a good explanation. This one's kind of, the more I read it, I almost feel bad about asking it because it's very broad, but at least maybe within what you're seeing or what you were kind of drove you to potentially going and doing this, like, are there some most common, in quotes, conditions or things that seem to really have benefit from looking at it from less functional medicine paradigm, I guess?
Sure. Yep. So I would say most of like the chronic health conditions that people suffer from, as opposed to more acute things, like that's probably where I would say like conventional medicine really excels, is like those acute care type things, or more of an emergency situation, or those types of things where the functional medicine approach is just a way to look at, okay, like what's underlying, what's causing that, because from looking at like an ancestral perspective, you know, our hunter-gatherer ancestors didn't really suffer from high cholesterol or obesity or, you know, high blood pressure. You know, autoimmune conditions really weren't that they weren't really a thing. So obviously, like, things have changed, like in terms of how our ancestors lived and thrived, and so I think addressing that component can really get at, like, okay, what's underlying to be causing these chronic issues. And I guess the functional medicine approach would look more at what is the root of that. Maybe it's not for everybody, because some people would rather just be like, okay, well, yeah, I've got X, Y, or Z, and I'd rather just take a med to lower my blood pressure. Like that's easy for me, and that's great. You know, maybe functional medicine approach wouldn't be the best for that individual, but for somebody that's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to just mask a symptom. Like, obviously there's something underlying there. So let's look at the root of that and see what's going on, and see if we can address like why that blood pressure is high in the first place, or why cholesterol levels are kind of out of whack. And I think that's like the overall approach for the functional medicine, just kind of like that underlying root, and just kind of addressing that. It's almost like a target approach. So like the center of that of the circle is like the exposome that we talked about, or like the person's genetics and then all the environmental factors. And if that kind of gets out of whack, outside of that, you have, like some pathology, something that's just not working correctly in the body. And then if that goes on for long enough, then, you go outside of that, and then you're going to get or diseases or syndromes that are going, whether that's irritable bowel syndrome or you name it. And then outside of that, you're going to have symptoms because of that, right? Maybe it's GI distress or that type of thing. Ultimately, like the symptoms, that's what shows up, and that's what people notice. And you can, take things to suppress the symptoms, and that addresses like that outer layer. But the functional medicine approach is not going to, address that outer layer. It's going to get at, okay, like what's going on initially that's out of whack within the exposome or within the person's environment, whether it's dietary or whatever, that's causing that pathology, that's causing that disease or syndrome, that's causing the symptoms. So like kind of, I guess, more of an inside-out approach. But a long answer to the question, I would say just more of like the chronic type diseases and stuff that are just so prevalent today. And I feel like it's just kind of getting worse with our society. Again, it's not for everybody, but I think that there is a growing need of people, or a growing demand for people to try to figure out, okay, like what's going on here. They want more answers than just taking something to suppress it, I guess.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just knowing you and your practice, and you can see them behind you with your DNS posters, that general approach to how you do things, not just, and we've talked about this a lot, pain is a symptom. It's not necessarily the problem when it comes on the musculoskeletal stuff, in that if you've got generalized knee pain, well, that's where the pain is, but it might be being facilitated from somewhere else. And we got to figure out where that is in order to get that to go away. For
sure. Yeah, that's a great analogy to it. And I think a lot of times when that happens, the side effects are positive then. Like if you can figure out what that root cause is, or what the source is, whether it's, say they've got knee pain, and maybe they've got some low back stuff that they didn't even mention because it's not as prevalent, but then you fix what's going on at the hip. Yeah, then it fixes their knee pain, but maybe their back's functioning better too. It's just like an added bonus, like an extra side effect. I think you're going to get the same type of thing with the functional medicine approach. You're just getting these added bonuses that maybe just aren't as noticeable.
What, if you could, kind of walk us through what like an appointment might look like with you, or just kind of like if somebody were to go in and reach out to someone, whether, it's locally with yourself or somebody, obviously everybody does everything just a little bit differently. So, but just maybe kind of what a general appointment and then potential intervention would look like if somebody was interested in doing functional medicine.
Yep. So I'll explain kind of how we're doing it now, and then I'm also going to mention that we're kind of exploring if this is the best way to do it for now, because I want to be able to make it accessible to more people, and a lot of times, like, these tests aren't covered by insurance companies or that type of thing, where people are having to pay out of pocket. So sometimes people prefer just to go somewhere where their insurance is going to cover everything. So we're just trying to look at, okay, what's the best way to make it like affordable and something that's accessible for everybody. But right now, we just start off with like an initial consult appointment, and it's just basically kind of like a very broad overview of, okay, what are your top 3 things that you've got going on? Maybe for some people, it's just like, number 2 and 3 are not that big a deal, but number 1, like, this is a big deal. For other people, maybe, it's several things, but let's just try to, let's get the biggest three, and then just get an idea of like, okay, how is that affecting you? And just a very brief overview of systems, from like sleep to musculoskeletal to how's your digestion, all that type of stuff. So just an overview of what that person's got going on, and then from that appointment, it kind of gives me an idea of, okay, what do we want to order for tests, or what do we want to look at in more depth with that. So it just kind of gives us an idea of, okay, this is what we would recommend for testing right now. And so then we just kind of present that to the patient and be like, okay, based on what you got going on, what we talked about, these are the tests that we recommend, and that could be anywhere from like our case review blood panel is just basically like a standard blood panel on steroids a little bit. Like it's just a little bit more in depth. Looks at a few other markers, and it's basically just addressing more of a preventive approach. Like a lot of the conventional lab ranges are based on people that are coming in that are not doing well, that aren't healthy as it is. So do you want to be just not unhealthy, or do you want to actually, like for me, I'd rather just be healthy and not even go there. So there's two ranges. There's like the functional range. It's just usually a little bit tighter and narrower of range, and that's like ideal. And then you've got the lab range, so we can kind of just compare and see. And just because it's out of the functional range doesn't mean like we throw all kinds of red flags up and everything like that. But just kind of gives us an idea of, okay, this is going on, and if we can look at maybe some different markers, if there's patterns going on. Then there's other tests. It could be like a stool analysis, which we don't do that here. It's just a test that gets sent to the patient right at their home. They complete it at home and they can send it in. It's pretty easy in that regard, but it's super important. It can give a lot of information about like the microbiome and the gut bacteria, and not only what strains are present, because we want good bacteria there, but also it'll show like the quantities. So you want sufficient quantities of these good bacteria. There's other ones that are like, okay, if they're there, that's fine, but we just don't want them in too high a level. And then there's other ones that, like, if they're present at all, that's kind of a bad thing. So it gives a good breakdown there. There's urine test. This Dutch test, it's a dry urine test for comprehensive hormones, so it's a really cool way to look at hormone levels, and then not only the hormones themselves, but also their metabolites, so their breakdown products. What else? Oh, a breath test to check for like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It could be like, there's a variety of different tests. So anyways, we would say, okay, these are the tests that we'd like to run. Patient can either say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do that, or I think that we'd like to just start off with a few for now and see, down the road if we need to run others, we can do that. And once we kind of get the process rolling of the testing, actually there's some blood tests too that can check for like food sensitivities that are pretty cool as well. Can provide some valuable information. But then we give the patient, it's 5 handouts, and it's very comprehensive in terms of like questionnaires. One is like a dietary questionnaire, and it lists out like a whole bunch of different foods and like quantities of what you'd have. One is kind of like environmental exposures. One is like based on lifestyle. So just really gives a very thorough picture of a patient's life, and for maybe something that maybe they wouldn't typically think to mention. If they get asked about it, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe that could be plain cruel that they had no idea that it could be related. So it's just very comprehensive. Once we get all that information back, so I can kind of then look at, okay, these handouts that they submitted, the test results, and then we compile all that into a binder and just say, and I put together, okay, these are the relevant findings that we had on your lab test. If there's any recommendations for further testing, and then also, okay, what's the recommendations from here for treatment? What sort of dietary or lifestyle modifications need to be made? Are there any supplement recommendations or that type of thing? So then we sit down at the case review appointment, and that's like an hour and a half that we book. It's a very thorough, and we just sit down and just be like, okay, this is like the most personalized picture of your health and how you can get things back to healthy. And so we can go through the different labs and say, okay, this looks good. This, it's kind of on the border, or this is out of whack. This is what we would recommend doing about it. This is kind of like a treatment plan, and here's a plan of action from there. It's a back and forth, so hopefully, trying to get questions and a good understanding from patients, so that when they leave with that binder, they can hopefully go home and talk to their significant other or something to be like, okay, well, what's going on, instead of just saying like, I don't know, there's like something going on in my gut, or things are out of whack. Like, just for them to be able to be like, okay, kind of take some ownership of their health, and be like, okay, we've got somebody there helping us, but I know what's going on, and I know what we can do about it, and kind of have a plan moving forward. I think that's very empowering for a patient, and exciting, as well, to be able to kind of have hope and a plan, and whether it's for something that they've been dealing with for a long amount of time, that's just been spinning their wheels and frustrated because it hasn't fully gotten addressed, or whether it's for somebody else that's just looking to kind of fine tune things or optimize more for a set. I think you're muted, Joel.
Yep. All right. Sorry. The dog was hacking in the background, so I was trying to prevent everybody from having to listen to him. No, that information and getting that grasp on that you're going to be able to maybe do something about it has to be huge.
Yeah.
Through all of this, and what you've learned, how has that impacted like your life, and have you changed anything based on what you've learned, or gone through any testing on your own? Obviously you're also not one to do this, but it's not like you just did this thing for a year and aren't going to try and apply things that make sense for your own life and just be out there slinging it to other people.
For sure. It's been a process. Like you asked, how has this impacted my life? Like, obviously, and we've talked about it before, and how like you look at, constantly learning and constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's always been a process up to this point of, okay, what do you learn? And then how are you going to kind of tweak what you're doing from there? So there's, even before this training, that was the case. Throughout, it's been the case, and even moving forward, beyond that, it's an evolution. It's always hopefully going to change. The information that I've gathered has helped how I can help patients.
Mm-hmm.
Before they would come in with X, Y, or Z. For example, I've got a patient with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. She's, doing a pretty good job. She's gotten things like under control a little bit, but she wanted to just really like fine tune things, and like she's pretty young yet, so she wants to like optimize her quality of life and stuff. So just being able to have the tools to be able to like help her out in that regard, I think has been pretty cool. And moving forward, I think it's super important, and I'm very passionate about that. Kind of like why I went into it is like it's such an issue, like chronic disease, and I think that it can really be improved. So to be able to like be an agent for change in that regard is exciting to me. Still trying to figure out how best to utilize that. Like I said, like that's how we currently do things in the process, but still trying to look at like how can we make it better, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's impacted me personally going through this. Yeah, you're right. I'm not just slinging recommendations. I did undergo some testing, and I actually the term adrenal fatigue gets thrown out. I think people are familiar with that term a lot more. Kind of learned in training that that's maybe not the most accurate description for what's going on. It's more like a HPA axis dysfunction or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction, because it's not just the adrenals, it's like the hormones and everything that's going on. But basically, it's like burnout, like obviously, I try to be a go-getter and get things done and that type of thing. And I think I was kind of burning the candle from both ends and just experiencing some symptoms. And so I did some of that Dutch test, the hormone testing, and things were a little bit out of whack. So I think that was kind of cool in a way. I mean, it was like I'm my own guinea pig to be able to like, okay, like, all right, do something about it now then. And you better walk the walk instead of, just talking it. So just did some blood work as well a few months ago. Which is nice that we're able to offer that here now as well. So just different changes for myself and just kind of tweaking some things. And I'm looking forward to now, like after making those changes, to like go back and retest, because ultimately before too, like in terms of making recommendations to a patient or supplement recommendations, you're never fully sure unless you test. Like you test, you don't guess, and if you don't know, then it is just basically like, yeah, maybe it's an educated guess, but it's good to be able to actually see, okay, hard data, what are these numbers? Okay, let's make these recommendations, these changes, and not only hopefully the symptoms improve or whatever, but then to be able to go back and be like, okay, yeah, look at this, all has changed for the better. And maybe things still need to be modified, but it's just, objective evidence information is super helpful.
Kind of the last just general question we had written on here was, how do you see this in your practice going forward? Obviously, you've been a chiropractor for quite some time now, and now added this into the mix. Do you see this maybe kind of potentially overtaking some of your musculoskeletal stuff, or finding a really good way to blend all of it for the betterment of the patient?
Yeah. That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer of like a crystal ball and what it looks like, in a year or 5 years, and especially in light of, the current pandemic situation. But it's definitely an interest of mine. I definitely want to, be able to offer those services. I don't think I could fully leave the musculoskeletal thing behind. I think I'm just still trying to search on how to like be able to intertwine those. I actually have a meeting later today with an individual that kind of coaching and that type of thing, that hopefully to be able to get a little bit of help in that direction. But lately trying to explore options, like I said before, how to better be able to make the services more accessible. So exploring whether maybe like a subscription-based model would be beneficial, and maybe not so much for the chiropractic side of things, but for functional medicine, and just being able to like put together some sort of package that patients could get. The functional medicine visit, recommended testing, a certain amount of visits per calendar year, and then also have tied in there some health coach visits, just to be able to kind of like keep them on track for their goals. and that type of thing, and just looking at, okay, like what would I want? What is ideal, and therefore what would other patients want? And I think being able to provide different services within that, so not just the functional medicine, or not just me maybe as a provider or just one health coach, but to be able to have like different individuals with different skills that they could maybe say, okay, you had your one appointment with me, but maybe your next one is with somebody that focuses more on eating psychology, or whatever that particular patient needs, just to kind of tailor it a little bit more. And then, having those health coach visits sprinkled throughout, just to kind of, like I said, keep things on track and be an agent for change. But we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very curious to see how it all plays out as you move forward in it. So, anything else around functional medicine that we didn't cover that you feel like we'd be remiss if we did not?
Oh man, no, I think we kind of hit the most of it. I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to very fundamental, like the basics of, okay, I mentioned like that kind of ancestral perspective, or like hunter-gatherers, they really didn't eat processed foods or anything like that. So like just whole foods, I think that's pretty basic. If it doesn't come in a bag or box, or your grandma wouldn't recognize it, ideally shouldn't eat it or whatever. I'm a realist, like I enjoy ice cream and that type of thing. I don't eat it all the time, but we've talked about the 80-20 rule before, like trying to do a good job most of the time, or cut out the big things. But also, like with that hunter-gatherer type thing, like we as a society really, we're both sitting in front of electronics right now. We're both sitting. Like people didn't do that before. They weren't inside most of the time. So like just, getting in touch with nature, like getting that sun exposure, and I think a lot can be said for that. And I think obviously there's benefits there. I don't know if, scientifically you can pinpoint, okay, these are all the benefits of being out in the sun, and here's why. Like we just know that, yeah, it's good for people. You can't just live in a dark box all the time and have your circadian rhythms and stuff all jacked up. Like, I don't know. We don't have to have like an X, Y, or Z scientific explanation to know that that's good for us. Yeah, that'd be really cool to have, and maybe we'll have that at some point. But I do think that's important as well. Like sleep, we talk about stress management stuff. Like people are go all the time, and that is easier said than done. I personal example. We talked about the draft that I was going through with the HPA access stuff, and like stress management is a huge component to that.
Well, and with that, I don't know that we need to ask all of our clinically pressed questions, but there are a couple I think that would be good with this. If people wanted to find out more just on their own reading, we've already kind of mentioned ultra prevention. Any other books that you've come across that people might, if there's want to do a little bit more homework before they might look into something like this? Any ones off the top of your head?
Unconventional Medicine is a really good one by Kresser.
Okay.
That's more recent than ultra prevention. But both Chris Kresser and Mark Hyman are kind of pioneers of the field. There's other big names out there that I didn't mention, but those are the two that probably I read that had the biggest impact on me. Those I think would be a great start. And then there's a lot of different resources out there in terms of blogs, websites, that type of stuff. Obviously, I like Chris Kresser, going through his program and stuff. but I mentioned, how he presents the information, I think, in a very understandable way. It's not too sciencey or too basic. So he's got a lot of different blogs regarding functional medicine. It's interesting. He's got a ton, just different conditions or whatever. If you just Google Chris Kresser paleo or, irritable bowel syndrome, blood pressure, cholesterol, you'll get a whole bunch of useful articles.
Has any of this changed your opinion on a most influential quote unquote fitness purchase?
Probably, but I don't know if I could pinpoint. Yeah, I don't know. I think I said before, a foam roller.
Yep.
Regarding fitness, I still think that's a pretty across the board useful tool.
That's fair.
I mean, I think that's a safe bet. I'm sure I could find a lot of different gadgets and things, in terms of health and fitness. And I think, for different people, there's going to be different recommendations too.
Sure. And then I know you wouldn't actually use this word, but I'm gonna say it anyway. In this new area of expertise, which I know you won't agree with that, and I understand why. How would you make what is complicated within it simple?
Like we just kind of mentioned, it really ultimately kind of comes back to the basics. Like we've gotten out of whack with like how our ancestors kind of did things, just eating a well balanced diet, not a lot of processed foods, moving, getting some sort of physical activity, getting adequate sleep. I think those are all just huge. I think that's all pretty basic. Like, easier said than done, though, for sure. Like,
Right.
Yeah, you could, no problem. But if you actually be able to implement that stuff, that's probably a lot more challenging.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for filling us in on everything functional medicine.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time and asking me the questions.
Always. Thank you for checking out this episode of Clinically Pressed. Go to clinicallypressed.com for full show notes and links to everything that we covered in this episode. While you're there, you'll have full access to all our episodes, insights, and shorts. You can find Clinically Pressed on YouTube or any podcast outlet that you use. If you could give us a rating, thumbs up, or a review on how we're doing, we would greatly appreciate it and heard it helps out quite a bit. To get more free content delivered straight to your inbox, sign up for the Total Athletic Therapy newsletter at totalathletictherapy.com or clinicallypressed.com. You'll get direct links to all the new Clinically Pressed episodes, reviews on some of the latest research in health and performance, and links to related podcasts and other items meant to help you make the complicated simple and optimize performance. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.